for you on the cloud offerings in today's market and various e-commerce options for those cloud offerings. We think it's a tremendous opportunity for companies in the retail space and the business-to-business transaction space to take advantage of the e-commerce capabilities on top of a cloud solution. I've been with Talon for 16 years, working on all over the spectrum of software development projects for our customers. My first e-commerce project was for Barnes & Noble back in 1997. Joining me on the phone today is Stan Kennedy. He leads our cloud offering and connected systems practice with 15 years of experience in software development. And Greg Ebert, who leads our e-commerce practice with 12 years of experience in software development. And I'm going to turn over the webinar now to Stan Kennedy, who will start to talk about cloud options. We'll also talk about security considerations on the cloud, which I know is on the forefront of everyone's mind. Having your data off-site can be a nervous proposition, so we want to put people's minds at ease of what is out there. We're going to talk about the e-commerce engines that we have experience working with in cloud solutions. We're going to have a demo of one of those offerings, and we're going to talk about advantages of e-commerce in the cloud. We think that there's tremendous opportunity here, and we want to talk to you about all of those capabilities and options with an e-commerce solution on a cloud platform, and how Talon can help you deliver those solutions. So I'll turn it over now to Stan, who will talk about the cloud options that we see in the market today.
Great, thanks, Greg. Many cloud providers are available and are increasing at a rapid fire. So I think what we'll focus on, though, is two providers that Talon feels that's the most robust, mature, and secure in the industry. While Microsoft's Azure and Amazon's Elastic Cloud, or EC2, serves different needs, Talon has embraced Azure really as the platform of choice. So first, let's look at Microsoft Windows Azure option. Unlike other cloud providers, Azure really offers its cloud services as a platform as a service, or PaaS. And really what that means is you focus more on the application and less on the underlying infrastructure. Azure has a level of abstraction, a piece of software that basically automates the creation and management of virtual machines. So all the hot fixes, the patches, the backup processes, the OS upgrades, all that is really handled by the platform. So really, simply put, that just enables the implementer to focus on the application and customer service. So the Windows Azure Virtual Machine OS is also optimized. It's a stripped-down version of Windows Server 2008 R2. And to really harness the power of that platform as a service, the storage is stateless. And so what that means is that all the static content is really stored out on a loaded VM that can be shared among different instances. And that really promotes the self-healing of the platform and being able to spin up and down virtual machines. The service layer agreement is 3.5 nines, which is good. I think that works out to be around 6 hours of unavailability per year. And then also it undergoes multiple compliance audits. So next, let's talk about the next cloud option, which is Amazon Elastic Cloud Compute, or EC2. So where Amazon's EC2, it has very similar cloud characteristics, and it's one of the top known cloud providers out there. It has some of the characteristics such as elasticity scaling, metered utility billing, and automated scaling. EC2, though, is more of an infrastructure as a service running in the cloud. It supports, it's sort of a blurred line there between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. It supports many operating systems, including Windows. But the virtual machines are stateful, very similar to what you have on premises and hosted infrastructure as a service. Also, Amazon EC2 has a place in the market where complicated OSs and IaaS configurations remain. Also, if you have something like Tomcat running. So that may be a better fit where Azure may not be the best fit for that. So like Azure, Amazon also offers SLA of 3.5 nines. So if we move on and we talk about Azure and EC2, more of a comparison. What we see on the left is the Windows Azure. Now I've picked a few here. There's quite a bit of comparison metrics here, but we picked a few here to sort of show some of the differences. Both of them offer a lot of similar services when it comes down to it. The pricing is very competitive between the two, and with Azure, it seems to be a better fit with .NET e-commerce applications, whereas EC2 may be a little, a better choice for non-Microsoft OSs. Other things include, if you're doing Microsoft development, the tools are integrated within cloud development. There's SDKs that allow ease of development and deployment within the cloud. On the EC2 side, deployment is very similar to, although some of it's automated, it's very similar to on-premises hosted solutions. Okay, so that's a little bit of a comparison. I think next we'll talk about one of the big things that always comes up, and that's cloud security. So security is always one of the first concerns we hear from potential customers or the field. Whenever you hear cloud, security is typically, you see the red flag from everyone that says, okay, what about security? So we'd like to really address this topic, with confidence. We've done a ton of research on this. We're getting ready to release a white paper regarding security. So, it's our job to make sure not only the clients are comfortable with security, but we are also. So we always hear the problem is, I know my own security, I can process it end to end, but if I put it on the web, then I'm faced with the client, network, and vendors level security, and that's just too big of a risk. And so when I hear that, I think about in the 90s when e-commerce was getting big, and people had to put their credit card numbers into a web form, for example. Most people had a lot of reservations of putting their number and their credit card information in a web page and hitting a button because it went off to a space that they just weren't familiar with. And I think the same is going to evolve with cloud. I think as we start to move more things to it and things become more secure and mature, and we build that confidence level. So really the solution is really awareness of, a lot of times, we have to be honest and look at our own security, whether it's on premises, and really look at all aspects of security. So it's just not data, having access to data and so forth. So if we look at the next slide, here are the aspects or layers that needs to be addressed. With Azure, I think the architectural planning and security is addressed at all those levels. So in order to really make you confident with Azure's security model, let's really walk through the human, data, application, host, networking, and physical layers. So next slide, we'll talk about the human layer of security. So the human layer of security is really addressed by, Microsoft has done a lot of work in terms of Microsoft personnel having restricted access. Additionally, they undergo background verifications. There's only a limited number of employees that can actually get in the data center and those who can access the data center. Additionally, they have implemented biometric security. Scanning is also required for entry. And so really, they have 24/7 security, and really no piggyback entry is really possible. Next, we'll talk about data layer security. So here's a big one for everyone's concern. So from a data layer perspective, all the data stored in Azure Storage Services requires a storage access key. It's a unique generated key. Any access to those data requires the unique storage key, the name of that storage account, and finally your subscription ID. All the access is gated by your Azure subscription ID. That's basically created when you set up your account. All data in transit is encrypted. So, for example, SQL Azure, the relational data store for Azure, uses the tabular data stream, which is our familiar TDS, and it will not allow any connections unless it's secure. Additionally, special firewall rules must be configured on SQL Azure to allow incoming IP connections from calling clients. So even if you were to get a hold of someone's connection string, unless your client IP address was added to the incoming firewall rules, you would not be able to access that data. Next, we'll talk about application layer security. Now, with application security, again, we're platform as a service, which means Microsoft manages it from infrastructure down. So really, application security is ultimately left up to the implementer. Azure does, however, support the commonly used security best practice frameworks, such as the security offered in .NET and ADO. Also, it supports HTTPS. Applications can use SQL Server connection string formats just like they do today by changing the SQL Azure server name and password and user. So very similar there. Next, let's talk about the hosted layer of the operating system. So the Windows Azure Virtual Machine Operating System has automated OS patches, which means, and again, this is part of the platform as a service, which means that really the highest level of security is always being up to date, and it's available. So as soon as Microsoft releases it, it's applied to those operating systems. Now there are many levels of isolation between the public and your VM operating system. Microsoft has included a layer of software that runs on that platform called Fabric Controller, and its really job is to spin up instances, monitor the health of applications. But really what that means is there's, again, a few more layers built on top of that operating system that reduces surface attack. So when that Fabric Controller creates VMs, it automates the VLANs and the load balancing on the fly. With this multi-layered architecture, I think that really enhances the security level again. Next, we'll talk about network layer security. So here's another one. I think they've done a really good job. The network layer really uses multiple firewalls at every single layer. There's VLAN, secure channels, is not susceptible to any malicious packet sniffing, for example. The network isolation prevents customers accessing other VMs outside their subscription. So while you'll have a hosted VM with I think there's actually 8 instances running on each physical host, there's no access to other VMs outside your subscription. When VMs are created, the VLAN is configured to those instances only, so external access is only allowed through public virtual IP address or VIPs. And that's configured within the service definition file as well, so you configure which IPs are coming through and whether it's HTTPS. That traffic is routed through Azure's load balancer infrastructure. Load balancing comes out of the box. When you tell it to create 4 instances, it creates the VLAN, the load balancing, and all of those virtual machines within minutes. Additionally, the host computer containing the VMs is not addressable externally, and so it's not really directly accessible with other Azure tenants. And finally, around network layer security, Azure also has monitoring capabilities that can detect attacks, and it can basically remove any kind of malicious activity out there. So pretty robust. So finally, we'll talk about the physical layer security. So with that, we're really talking about the data center itself and the physical aspect of this. It undergoes ISO 27001 and SAS 70 Type 2 certifications for data center processes. There's motion sensors, 24/7 protected access, biometric controlled access systems. There's video camera surveillance, and security breach alarms and auditing standards are always upheld by certified auditors. The physical data center is really not disclosed, so there's really no way of telling where the data center is. Even if you were to find out where the data center is, being able to get into it and actually put your hands on a specific piece of data is going to be almost impossible.
Stan, this is Craig. I just wanted to add one more comment on the security side. The bottom line is that there are large corporations out there that can afford to set up all of this themselves and have their own data center and have their own hosting. The security personnel that's required to set up something of this magnitude are very expensive, and it's constantly learning and constantly staying ahead of the curve on what are the threats. Microsoft essentially takes that off the table with Azure. They provide all of that for you. Even Talon, with all of our expertise in technology, we could not afford the security precautions that they have put in place, from the personnel themselves who have the knowledge to the physical capabilities to the network security that's built in. It really takes, especially for the small to medium-sized business, it gives them the ability to really take advantage of the best of breed in security that they could not otherwise afford themselves. Even with local hosters who will provide most of this, Microsoft has taken it to a whole nother level. So we would argue that their security is as good or better than anyone could possibly create for themselves.
Thank you, Stan and Craig, for just clarifying the common misconception that the cloud isn't secure, when in fact it's probably more secure than a lot of our systems in general. Now that we know kind of that, let's discuss kind of what cloud-compatible e-commerce engines we have out there. Now, there are quite a few of them to choose from. Now, as far as just e-commerce engines in general, it seems like there are quite a few products. However, there are three that kind of stand out as far as, being compatible with the cloud and, are pretty commonly used out there. Those are Multifront, Insight Commerce, Magento. Multifront is Microsoft-based. It was created by Znode. Znode was founded in 2007. It's actually the youngest of these three. It was recently purchased by the Yale Group and is listed in Inc. magazine's top 500 fastest growing companies actually for 2011. So they're kind of a younger up-and-coming kind of e-commerce engine. Insight Commerce is Microsoft based as well, and it was created by Insight Software. Insight Software was founded back in 2004, and they've actually established quite a client base, recently as well. And their experience kind of in hosting e-commerce sites for clients themselves have kind of made them a major player in being ready for e-commerce cloud arena as far as how their application was structured, et cetera. And Magento, it's been out there since 2001. It's been kind of a major player for a while now. But unlike the others, Magento is kind of each PHP and MySQL based though. So, all three of these offer a wide range of features and a suite of products to kind of complement their core e-commerce products. We don't have the time to go through comparison line by line of every single little feature that these guys offer. Let's just kind of take a look at kind of some high-level items here in general. Basically, we have that Multifront and Insight Commerce are both C# or SQL Azure based, and Magento is PHP and MySQL based that I kind of mentioned earlier. This is just kind of important to consider when just what technologies your company is going to support. When you take over, the site, for example, if somebody were to put it together for you or support it. Because of the technology used, this allows both Multifront and Insight Commerce to run on both Azure and EC2, so you have a little bit of flexibility there as far as your actual cloud options. Magento is more limited just to EC2 because of the PHP MySQL aspect of it, PHP MySQL aspect of it. All three of these products do also provide kind of source code. So, that kind of comes with a certain extent. Obviously, you can't actually get the credit card processing DLL, for example. Like there's some PCI compliance aspects of it that, obviously there'll be some limitations to. But because you do get the source code, there's, quite a flexibility there. When it comes to pricing, each of these three kind of take their own little approach. Multi-Front, with their 6.5 version, is taking more of an annual subscription based on the Azure instance size that you start out with. Inside Commerce, on the other hand, is subscription-based as well, but it's based on more of the number of users and expected revenue, as your site grows type of thing. Magento is just a straight-up regular kind of annual fee, traditional server model type of approach where, since it runs on EC2, they're more like virtual servers, it more is a server-by-server license. When it comes to setting up multiple stores, Magento and Multi-Front kind of allow multiple stores to be created without any kind of additional cost at all. It's just straight up included in there. There's a small fee when it comes to the Inside Commerce version of it when there's setup of additional sites, because theirs is more of a true kind of a pay-as-you-go type of model. That's kind of where that comes into play. All three of the products do have like mobile UI aspects that are available. You can they're kind of add-ons to the e-commerce product. It's one of those features that's kind of built to support it. Each of the three kind of do support internationalization as well. There's just slightly different approaches on how each of those are handled, though. But and when it boils down to it, you can set up international support on any one of the three. So when it comes to kind of the built-in CMS editors, there's always a couple pages like the About Us, the Contact Us, that there's copy and edits and things, or even the home page that you want to edit, kind of publish out there and kind of just tweak the look and feel of your site a little bit. So to support that, Multi-Front has a built-in HTML editor and HTML/text editor, while Inside Commerce and Magento, they provide more of kind of a WYSIWYG type of editor where what you see, what you get type of thing, as well as the basic HTML editor. While there are quite a few other things we could compare in these three, we're not necessarily going to go into each, in a lot of detail. If you have more questions about any one of the three or questions about anything in particular, feel free to reach out to us and we can definitely talk through those more. As we're discussing e-commerce engines, though, there are other ones out there, especially those are using fairly common. So you should kind of just take a look at those real quick. Those include everything from Microsoft's Commerce Server to Shopify to External, just to name a few. A few of these offer not necessarily cloud solutions, but hosted solutions. While hosted solution doesn't require you to purchase your own hardware, it's not quite the same as the cloud-based approach. So, even though they may say it's cloud-based, we may be using it a little loosely there. We won't really go into a feature-by-feature comparison of these as well. We've mainly wanted to focus on the ones that were more, cloud-compatible, for example. Now that we've kind of just highlighted some of these, the e-commerce products that are available and some of the Azure highlights, for example, let's just kind of jump over and take a look at just a site that's running out on the cloud, for example. Let me just toggle over here real quick. Now, this is a site we kind of have running out on the cloud. We have the website running out on a SQL Azure, an Azure instance. The database is running in SQL Azure. All the images are actually hosted out on the blob as well. If you look at the URL, for example, you'll see that they're out there. Now, you can also tweak that a little bit where they're hosted out on the CDN, which would come in a little handy when it comes to more if you're a global type of audience. Now, some of the things to consider when you have the e-commerce is just, your search has to be really easy to get to and fast in general. It has to be something pretty easily to get to. It also has to be pretty easy to get to the help sections. If anyone has any questions during checkout, you don't want them to just kind of drop off. One of the things to note here as well is, for SEO reasons and just items in general, it's important to have your URLs all be, actual URL-based, your links, I should say, rather than JavaScript-based. That'll allow the search engines to crawl through things a lot easier. If they're more human readable as well, it's a lot easier as well because then people will remember them more. You get keywords out of those, so they'll show up better in your search engines, etc. You also want to make sure you've got an appropriate amount of just content on your site for people when they're buying on the web. They do want to kind of find out a little bit more about the product, so they're making sure they're buying the right thing. So providing enough support there and enough information about it is also kind of important. You also want to be careful about how deep you go in the products. You don't really want to go more than like 2 or 3 deep as far as the categories go. People want to really be able to get down to their stuff pretty quickly. And also, obviously you want to be able to upsell things as much as you can. So, for example, here, you could sell other related products, or people also bought these types of things. Really the upselling, you have to do quite a bit through the website, because you don't have a sales rep kind of there really kind of guiding them and trying to upsell them along the way, and making sure they're kind of getting the right product. So, one thing, let's go back over to the card. Oh, for some reason it's not, well, we'll come back to that in just a minute. I mean, one of the things to note about e-commerce in general as well is you also want to make sure, very sure, that they are able to give you your money easily. You want to be able to accept multiple payments, credit cards, PayPal, Google Checkout, etc. If they have to go through a bunch of different steps, or if they have to go through and register on their site before you actually do the purchase, a lot of people will drop off. So, having a checkout as a guest is pretty common as well. Kind of lets them skip through everything. As you can see, kind of as we're just kind of clicking around in here, the actual page loads are pretty quick. Like this is all on the cloud, and it'll scale kind of as many users or servers and everything as you need. Obviously, our little demo site here doesn't have a whole lot of traffic, but I'm going to hand it back over to Stan here, and he's going to kind of just explain a little bit about how this was configured in Azure.
Okay, so what I'd like to show you as part of the demo is I'd like to give you just a quick tour of Windows Azure and the platform. So we'll be going over a couple things just in the portal. It really kind of syncs some of the things that we were talking about in the presentation, some of the elasticity and those type of things. So first, the dashboard is really just a quick view of all of your deployments, whether they're in staging or production. You can see that it monitors it monitors all the instances. So if it becomes unhealthy, it'll automatically self-heal, spin up new instances. So you can see where that's happening at basically from one page. Also, I'd like to show you, I mentioned the storage account in the security section. You can see here that when you create a storage account, you create those keys. You can see here that on the right where we have view the key, you'll need that access key, which is automatically generated. You can regenerate that. Obviously, I'm showing this on a webinar, so although it's not the complete key, I can easily regenerate that key and update my configurations within the application. Really, best practice is it really mandates that you put in the implementation or procedure where you basically recreate your keys every now and then. Not necessary, but just if security really is one of those things that you're concerned about, it's just another measure. So also, we have VM images. We'll go through a couple of those, but what I'd really like to show you is the hosted services. So you can see here is where the role is running. So right now I have one instance of that application running in the cloud right now. You can see here on the right there's a DNS name. Obviously that's the cloud app name. You can register your own URL and have that DNS entry set up. But what I'd like to really show you is how easy it is to spin up multiple instances. So let's fast forward, say you deployed your application and it's November, October, or maybe even December in sales. Let's say it's predictable burst pattern and sales are really through the roof, and you realize that you need more instances. With Azure, it has that elasticity where you can on the fly either configure it through this portal, or there's also APIs that you can call to manage that automatically as well. So we click on Configure in the top ribbon here. We can do Edit Current Configuration. We can change that. Let's say we need 6 instances now. Now, while I'm doing this, think about in a typical hosted infrastructure. even though VM is pretty popular now, what this is doing right now is it's creating 5 more instances. It's creating the VLAN that they communicate through. It's creating the load balancer, the automatic load balancer, so there's no configuration with that. So it's doing all those things, and this is really what we mean by platform as a service. So at this time, we're not really procuring servers. We're not jumping up and down because we can't handle the load and those type of things. But then when February comes around, we can dial this back down. And that's really the model, the utility model of pay-as-you-go. So while that's spinning up, I think we'll go ahead and turn it back over to Greg. Let's go ahead and share the deck again, and we'll talk about the next topic, which is some of the cloud capabilities. And that's going to run for 15, 20 minutes or so. You can see there they've started to 6 instances just started up, and so again, when you think about the timing, think about how long it takes to actually build that infrastructure. Okay. So some of the cloud capabilities. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk about some of the flexible pricing that's available. With Azure, you have commitment levels and also pay-as-you-go. High performance, scalable, and demand. We talked about a little bit about that elasticity. It's high availability and fault tolerance. That's a big one. Localization independence, and that really is just another couple words for supporting international sites. Connects to existing on-premises applications. We all know that's important, that most e-commerce applications have to connect to your existing systems. And then scalable background and batch processing. Okay, so first let's talk about, on the next slide, flexible pricing. So we pay-as-you-go. The way I like to typically describe the difference in the cloud and a hosted solution is really the image on the left is a generator. And what I like to sort of use this analogy is you think about when you build an application, an e-commerce application or any application, you meet with the IT server folks, and we try to do the best planning we can. So there's a ton of planning, just like it is with this generator. You need to plan how much output you need from this generator, what your peak's going to be like. And then not only that, but you have to maintain it with fuel, oil changes, tune-ups. So you have a lot of upfront cost, maintenance, and then you hope that you've planned accordingly to your peaks. In comparison, really the cloud is represented by this receptacle, which really means that it's on demand, it's easy to use, the interface is always the same, and you're really not concerned about what's behind that wall plate. And so really that's what we're looking at when we're talking about flexible pricing and utility, the utility model. Okay, if we move on to high performance and scalability. So here's where we start talking about, we just demoed where we created 6 instances. So we scaled out from there. You can increase VM size. You can pick certain sizes of that as well, so you can scale up as well. So if you just need, a machine with more memory or more CPU or whatever that is, you can pick a bigger instance, for example, and you can scale that out as well. So a lot of opportunities here to really fine-tune, make sure your application is always performing and it's scalable. Okay, next, elasticity in a traditional IT model. So this diagram is really to illustrate over a period of time, or the x-axis, and IT capacity. So here again, we've talked about doing those initial plannings for servers, and we're hoping to plan for our peak time, for example. So especially in retail industry, where there's predictable burst workload patterns, we know that at a certain period of time, there's going to be, we're going to need X amount of resources, but also unpredictable bursts as well. Sometimes you can't predict that load. So in this illustration, what we see here is right out of the gate, and you'll see the actual load line there. That represents how much resources we actually need. You can see out of the gate that there's a ton of resources that's built out for that peak, too much power. So while we think that's great, the problem is that that's a lot of IT resources, a lot of maintenance, so patches, OS patches, all those types of things that has to happen. We need to maintain that throughout the whole year to maintain peak. And so what happens when peak comes? So that's really the red area there. All of a sudden we figured out that we really missed the boat. We are actually doing more sales, for example, than we expected, and our infrastructure is not supporting it. So not only did we spend all that money up front, and we did all that maintenance, and we have the IT staff, but now we discovered that we just missed it. So at that point, we're scrambling to procure new servers and build those environments out. And once we do that, we can handle the load. Well, guess what? February, March, the load goes back down, and now we've built this infrastructure and maintenance for, let's say, 4 months out of the year that we have to maintain all year. In comparison, on the next slide, in a utility IT model, you're scaling up and down when you need it. So, for example, I just had an instance running out of the gate. You could start out with 2 instances. You'll need the 2 instances at least to get the 99.5 or the 3.5 nines SLA, because you'll need you'll need a failover for example. So you'll need at least 2 instances out of the gate. So you can start with that, and as things start ramping up, you can create more instances. And then in February, when that volume goes back down, we'll turn that knob back down and save those resources. And by the way, we'll only pay for what we use. Okay. So the next illustration and the topic I'd like to talk about is high availability and fault tolerance. So here is, if you look at the 2 top boxes, there's 2 instances that we configured here. There's a web role test 1 and a worker role test 2. So you can think of the worker role as perhaps here we have, a couple instances on the worker role, and you can think of that as synonymous to an application or middle tier, if you will. And then you have the web role, the yellows. You can see that it's routed, requests are routed through that automated load balancer. And the load balancer figures out where to serve that request. Each one of the horizontal black boxes represents a physical virtual machine hosted box. And then each small one is a virtual machine. So you can see here there's two web roles, the yellow ones, and there's actually on the blue there's 4 on one side and 4 on the other. So here's representing, for example, a middle tier that has tons of processing. But if you notice at the bottom there's a fault domain. So when you deploy these, it splits it up in different fault domains, which means those catastrophic problems that come up won't affect all of your nodes, for example. It's distributed throughout that fault domain. Also, we mentioned the platform as a service. The Fabric controller software that runs on top of all of this and controls it. It monitors all the virtual machines. It sends heartbeats. It self-heals. It sends up other virtual machines. So high availability. Again, we mentioned 3.5/9. Load balancing within data centers is automated, and that's ready to go as soon as you create those. The server health is monitoring and auto recovery. There's application load balance and failover capabilities between data centers. So here we hear a lot about, if a data center goes down, what happens to my application? If that application needs to be up 24/7, no downtime, then proper planning needs to be done. And there's an application called Traffic Manager within Azure that allows you to set up failover load balancing between data centers. Okay, next, localization independence. So here, Greg mentioned that the images, he showed you the RESTful URIs for each one of those images. They're not stored on disk. They're stored in a blob storage because Azure is stateless. But one of the benefits is not only being able to scale very well, but is also being able to add those to a CDN or a content delivery network where it can be cached and available across many data centers. So you're not sending those images and files across the wire to Europe, for example. Caching and load balance is also supported. So the next topic, capability, is connect to existing application. So one of the two primary components that Azure uses is the App Fabric. It contains a service bus, which is controlled through Access Control Service, claims-based service. And there's also a caching service within the App Fabric. There's a few more things that's coming out soon. Those are the three that we'll talk about today. With the service bus, what that does is it enables you to communicate your cloud application through your firewall and through your existing applications. You can also communicate with your WCF services on the cloud. So it really provides the gateway for relaying those services. That's actually getting really robust now. It also has the capabilities of publish subscribe type things. So very interesting middleware. Second, the Azure Connect software is something that's installed client side and allows you to connect to that VLAN that's created by the cloud. Very powerful stuff there if you want to connect your applications on premise through that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about scalable batch processing. So here are the 4 workload patterns typically that we talk about with cloud. Unpredictable bursting, predictable bursting, growing fast, and on and off. Well, predictable bursting is those things where we know we're going to have load at a certain time. Now, it may be a retail site that's seasonal, or maybe it's the processing you do at night. Maybe you're exhausting all your resources, doing all these processing files or records. That's something that suits the cloud very well because if you run that once a month or once a day, you can spend those resources up to do that batch processing, for example. Next, we'll talk about cloud advantages for e-commerce. So we've learned a little bit about what cloud is, and we dove down into the elasticity, the pricing model, and the utility model. But let's talk about what this really means for you when putting the e-commerce site on the cloud. So, number one, time to market. I don't know how many times it's when you get with the staff and you try to figure out the resources, for example, how long that takes. So right out of the gate, you eliminate the infrastructure stage of that. And then obviously the application and deployment. So time to market is huge here. You can actually do proof of concepts and those type of things on the fly. Platform as a service, we talked about that with the Fabric controller and that abstraction layer that's providing that service. Pay as you go. So again, you pay as you go and you pay what you use for. You grow with the volume. That's the elasticity piece. You scale back servers and instances as needed to shrink it back. For example, we talked about that February turning down the knob after peak. And then the backups, OS patching, and so on, again, provided as a service. Okay, next, let's talk a little bit about some cloud architectural patterns and considerations. So things are a little different in the Azure world. All the VMs are stateless nature, which means in order for this platform as a service, it really has to be stateless. And what that means is, for example, you have to do a little something different with session management, because to have those sessions sticky between instances requires something different. There's definitely an answer to that, and it's proven out technology, and it's whether it's SQL caching, Fabric caching, or the caching block, or even Azure services, storage services. There's different ways of doing that depending on what fits. Application versus web instances. Here again, there's something called worker role, which is that middle tier. Storage of data and files, connecting to on-premise systems. So here again, there's something a little different. Out of the box, Active Directory will not be supported, but there's some ways to figure out how to connect your systems through AD on that. SQL Azure supported. Features compared to SQL Server. So there's some, right now out of the box, SQL Azure relational database. Some of the features are limited compared to SQL Server. So, during the migration analysis, we typically, look at those and make sure it fits. Let's talk a little bit about the stateless nature in storage. Here, Azure provides that through blob services, table, and queues. Now, the blobs is where you store images. It's that RESTful URI that Greg showed us earlier in the demo. Tables is really a value name key pair. So we're starting to see patterns where non-relational data, it scales really well if you can, reference those in those tables. And then queues is basically if you have a front end and you're loading all these images to your middle tier, you can load these up in the queue and it'll pull it off of those blob storages as the queue is basically as the queue is requested. Okay, now on the next slide, cloud versus traditional. So we talked about session state. We're going to do something a little different there. Files on disk, again, not guaranteed. There is a disk there, and you can store temporary files there. It's a great place to do some debugging and that kind of thing, but you can't rely on the files on disk. Data connectivity. With SQL Azure, it still supports the tabular data stream, so just changing your connection stream is all that's required. We do typically implement a retry pattern on those. Okay. For that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg to talk about use cases for cloud e-commerce.
Thanks, Ben. As some of these advantages, they have actually a great appeal to a wide variety of companies. It ranges everywhere from a startup to kind of a Fortune 500 company, and even just like we were saying, companies with seasonal spikes or just unpredictable spikes. For example, they get more traffic than they expected. For startup companies, for example, the key really here is the low initial initial cost to get in the door. You don't have to worry about purchasing or maintaining your own hardware. You can focus on your business and just getting that up and running quickly. And as your site scales or as it grows or as it becomes more popular, it scales automatically. In essence, kind of like Stan was saying earlier, where you just spun up 6 more instances. It's almost that easy, basically, where as your business grows, the site will just scale with you. So, the cloud actually really is a great fit for startup companies, especially when Craig was mentioning earlier, for example, like the security aspect of it. A small startup can't necessarily afford to have the same security as, say, Microsoft, for example. It also has great appeal to, seasonal or unexpected spikes. We all know if you live in a large city, those Halloween or Christmas decoration stores where the physical building is only open for like just a few months out of the year. And the same concept basically applies to e-commerce sites as well with seasonal traffic. I mean, do you really want to have all those extra servers just kind of sitting around all year and when you don't really need them, but except for during the time period when your traffic increases around the holidays? With the cloud-based solution, you just don't have to do that. Your site will scale up and down as traffic does. And so you don't really have all that unused hardware just kind of sitting around. This holds true for unexpected traffic spikes as well. I mean, for example, recently, Target.com experienced an outage related to the Mazzoni product line launch, where it was, extremely well received, and there was a lot of, it became very popular. However, I'm sure they preferred that their site would not have crashed, that they would have, been able to stay up and hold that the whole time, how much lost revenue would, let's say, your company, for example, miss out if, your site became really popular and you got a spike in traffic, or during your busy season, if it was down for, a day or two or so, that would affect your bottom line. So, it also appeals to Fortune 500 companies. Well-established companies that have been out there for a while usually have to maintain like a sea of servers. To do so, they usually employ a kind of large infrastructure support team. Think about all the time spent on NIC card and hard drive failures, OS upgrades, spinning up more servers, retiring old servers. If you strip away all that noise, IT could really spend a lot more time focusing on the business initiatives and supporting that, and just stay very business-oriented rather than just simply dealing with the day-to-days. When serving customers all over the world, for example, that image page load times become much more relevant or important. That's where the CDNs that Stan mentioned earlier kind of come into play. When you're serving up to Asia, you want to serve images from Asia to help with your page load times, for example. Azure was basically built with globalization in mind. That's kind of what they're targeting as well. So, now that we know, the cloud kind of offers a little bit of something for everything, kind of where do we go from here? Talon offers a few next steps for everyone to get started. For example, for those of you who want to get moving down the e-commerce path, don't know where to even begin, let us help solidify a roadmap for you to making e-commerce actually happen for you, kind of that envisioning e-commerce. For those of you who know you want an e-commerce site but don't know whether to host it locally on EC2 or Azure, we can kind of help you decide which one's right for you there. We will come in and take a look at your individual need as well as kind of, what we've learned over the years and kind of be able to suggest stuff for you there as well. For those of you who want an e-commerce site but don't want to deal with the technology side of it, don't want to deal with figuring out, with the hardware locally, for example, let us be your technical staff. We'll set up and manage your e-commerce site so that you can focus on your business rather than the actual IT portion of it. Over the webinar today, we have gone through quite a bit of material. So I'm going to hand it back over to Craig so he can briefly kind of recap kind of what we've gone through and what we've discussed, from here.
All right, thanks, Greg. Well, we hope it was informative for everyone. We tried to give you a little bit of flavor of cloud and e-commerce, a little demo on one of the e-commerce platforms that we've worked with quite a bit. There's a number of options, and we're very flexible in what you choose that is the best fit for you. We do have obviously some strong opinions on the Azure platform. We think that it's built to handle the whole gambit of needs from the small business startup to the large corporation, and there's many companies that are looking at it now, and it's in its early adoption phase, and I think we've tried to provide for you a good overview of what are all the capabilities with the cloud, and specifically with Azure, trying to address a lot of the standard concerns that people have when they look at a cloud platform, when you're sort of turning over the keys to that external provider. There is a lot of nervousness around it, and wanted to give you as much information as you can to give you that exposure to what the capabilities are, what the security model is, what are the considerations when you're looking at that platform, how do you scale, show you a little bit about how easy it is to spin up new instances, to monitor what's going on with your cloud solution, and then apply that to your e-commerce offerings. And we're getting a lot of inquiries now for that turnkey solution. I need to get my e-commerce site refreshed. I'm looking at the cloud. How does that work? How do they work together? And what does that mean for me? It's a different pricing model as well. It's very, the traditional model was I buy the e-commerce suite, I buy the hardware, I get it installed, I start using it. That takes time. Now it's really, you're looking at a subscription model by month, by usage, So a lot less upfront costs, more costs as your business grows, but that should be offset by the revenue that you're generating for that traffic that's coming in. So we hope this was a valuable use of your time today. We're happy to take some questions now. If anyone has any questions, we can talk about the things we've done on this platform and upcoming things that we're seeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. As a reminder, to ask a question, please enter it into the Q&A tab at the top of the screen. In front of you right now is a way to contact us if you have additional questions, if they come up after we end the webinar. As Greg mentioned, we do cover a lot of content today, so just for a moment, I just want to run by Craig, Stan, and Greg. You know, when people have their online business and thinking about whether to put it in the cloud, in your mind, what is the number one top thing they should start thinking about? Greg, did you want to kick off?
It's pretty easy, even with the e-commerce application on the cloud, to connect to some of your local systems like GP, for example, or like Salesforce or your local CRM instances. So they really shouldn't be as concerned about, can I interact, can I connect that to my systems here locally? So that actually kind of is something that a lot of people get concerned about, but it's actually not really a problem. One thing they should just consider is to simply, it's more of just a business process and how orders will flow from that into the rest of their systems, as opposed to actually worrying about the actual software itself. The products have matured quite a bit over the years.
This is Craig. I'll answer. My thoughts are this: that there's lots of options available, and we want to have people take away that there are those options, and that their unique situation can be addressed in a number of ways, and really look at their comfort level. What are they comfortable with as far as the solution that they're looking for? What's the pricing model that best suits their needs, and what is their inherent business need from the e-commerce side? Because we're looking at multiple cloud offerings, multiple solutions, even within the Azure platform. There's multiple ways to solve the problem. And then on the e-commerce side, there's lots of choices out there for e-commerce packages. We've worked with a number that we mentioned, including Znode, Multifront, and Insight, that we think are not only robust and have all the capabilities standard capabilities you would want from an e-commerce solution, but also offering that cloud capability on top of that. So I would want people to take away that the options are vast, and there is probably a solution that will best fit their challenge.